what I'm here to talk to you about today is pretty much a big drive, a big ambitious change in the way we explore. Eco-adventure is pretty much a concept I came up with where I'm trying to blend exploration and adventure with also stewardship and protecting the very things that we wish to explore. How can we go and explore these things without creating more harm? That's kind of the goal, really, because we've pretty much been all over the planet now. I think there's been a lot of talks in this group, and we've seen lots of different things, but how can we do it so that we can continue to coexist? And that's what I'm hoping to talk about today with you all. I have a geologist background, and I love to start with geology because that's really where I come from this angle into this adventure world. Geology and geoscience is kind of, I guess, the simple truth that nature underpins everything. That's one of the things that we're taught. You've got electricity, you've got water, you've got everything that you possibly rely upon. You've got rock minerals that come together and bounce around and create a computer that computes things. I mean, everything that we use is from the earth. And exploration has been one of those things where we've been able to create such great innovations. However, when do we find that we can continue doing this? There's that whole concept now, and you see it in the news all the time, that we are definitely exploring much faster and further than we can sort of rejuvenate and restore. The balance is tipped, and it's very clear for all of us. But I like to talk about this climate crisis, or I don't really like the concept of climate crisis, actually, because I personally believe it's a human survival crisis. Really what's happening is we're tipping the balance of ecosystems. We're sort of degrading ecosystems, which are the very things that keep us going. So really, when we talk about saving the planet and all these things, we're actually really talking about saving ourselves. And what I've tried to do is, when I had this recollection of this big, massive wave came over me where I realized I was part of the problem of tipping this balance, I wanted to do my own little thing in my own area where I felt that I was comfortable to change the way I do things to help restore the balance back. And I chose adventure and exploration. So instead of pioneering to explore somewhere new that never been discovered before, I thought about how about we just pioneer and try and do the same things we've kind of done but in a different way. And I call it the eco-adventure. So it's in its way, it's its own form of exploration, but it did require a lot of personal change on my part. Has anyone been to East Island before? Got one? Yeah, I've been there. It's really cool. But also, there's a message here, and this is the message I like to lead on, which is all around when there was Easter Islanders. There's a theory, and I mean, there's a lot of research now backing this evidence that the actual decline of population and ecology was down to unsustainable drain of the resources on this island. And Easter Island is just a bit like Earth. Earth is this remote thing in the universe, in a corner of space. Easter Island was a remote island in the south corner of the Southern Pacific. The same story goes. If we continue extracting and not rebalancing, we could end up in this situation, but on a global scale rather than an Easter Island scale. So I do like to lead on that. So everything I do, this is what I'm about, this is my purpose. I like to ask, these big questions. How can we continue as we have always done and explore and see all these great places, but also do it in a responsible way where we're also not taking so much that this ecosystem is no longer there to explore anymore. So I'm all about empowering people to look at themselves, look at the environment around them, work together to try and protect the ecosystems, and in doing so, that protects everyone's health and mental health. And that's what I'm all about, really. So that's a bit about me there. But where did it all come from? This isn't just magic. This view. This view didn't come from my head just randomly. There was a turning point, and I do have a confession to make. Everything I'm doing comes from a very selfish origin. Just saying. I had a very bad mental health crisis about 10 years ago, and I almost took my life. And there was one moment that changed everything for me. A friend could see I was struggling. They knew that I had issues, and they convinced me to go out on a walk in the outdoors. I literally was not in their mindset, but I did it anyway because I was so desperate. I was just clinging on to any form of hope. And I went for this walk, and I'd walked for about 3, 4, 5 hours or something like this, through rivers, along fields, and streams. And nature was just absolutely phenomenal. It was calming my thoughts. The first time I ever felt sane and at peace. First time I felt at peace. And I know there's explorers in this room, and they love getting outdoors and doing nature. One of the things that I think people love doing these expeditions and getting out there is that raw, connected feeling with the outdoors is so restorative. And research tells us that 20 minutes outdoors lowers mood, improves stress. When I say improves stress, reduces stress. We don't want improved stress. And that's research, right? But I didn't need that. I felt it. And that day, that was a turning point. It dug me out the hole. And I realized that I had something that I could turn to that was giving me hope to carry on for the next day. And that's where I started to sort of get into this mindset of, right, this thing is important. I need to protect this ecosystem because it's given me life here. So I felt like I owed it. And so what happened was, after that situation, adversity, the bounce back, the recovery, it doesn't always happen really fast. Some people just quickly recover from things, and others maybe need a bit more time to process. But when we're in nature, in the outdoors, oh my God, how many times have you walked in a countryside, you've done an hour walk, and you feel like it's a very long time? Because you've got a long time to process in nature. Because everything in the city moves so fast, you don't have much time to process. So recovery is quite slow. I found when I was in nature, I was recovering mentally and physically, and I had time to process it. It was fantastic. And you've got a statistic up there on the screen. A UK Mental Health Foundation statistic, 45% of people were in green spaces so that they could cope with the stress of the pandemic. Now, there's a reason for that, because they are restorative and we do need them. And what I'm all about, as you know, is I want to protect the ecosystems that we have because they're sustaining us and we have something to turn to. But currently, our trajectory is not looking like we're doing that very well. So we need a bit more courage, a bit more innovation, and a bit more change. People say to me, okay, Isaac, you've done a lot of expeditions. So what's your favorite part about going on expeditions? And for me, personally, my favorite part of any form of expedition is that deep connection with nature. I always say the same answer. I love being connected with nature on expeditions. I do it on purpose. This is an example. I rowed across the Atlantic Ocean. We've got another Atlantic Ocean rower here. It was such a great expedition. But what was really amazing about the expedition for me, and this is literally it, there was one moment where I was cleaning the underside of the hull. I was in the water. I was scraping barnacles underneath the hull. And what happened was I started hearing whale songs for the first time. This was my first whale encounter, by the way. I was hearing whale songs, and you could hear it from the deep, this chanting, melodic chanting. And a whale came up out the abyss, and it was just, circling us. And its eye was like the size of my head. It was locked on. And I was just, having that deep connection, toe to fin, with this whale, this incredible creature. Just unbelievable, unbelievable moment. And those are the things that I remember when I go on expeditions. And that's why I'm so protective of these natural creatures, but also the ecosystems that they live in. But I've traversed the globe, and I have gone to lots of different places. And I've seen a lot of devastation. And I'm sure a lot of adventurers or people in the room have seen some pretty awful things. Some of the worst things I've ever seen were actually on the Atlantic Row when I was doing the expedition. I remember this specific moment where it was about 1,500 miles into the Atlantic Ocean, and I saw this turtle. We were going through some fast currents, and it was big waves, and I saw this turtle trapped and ensnared in a net, a fishing net. And I just remember just like watching it go and thinking, I wish I could help, but gone. Like, it was that fast. But it was very much like a moment where I was thinking, well, hang on a minute. I like to eat fish. The fishing net, that could have been the fishing net that caught the fish for me, and it's just caught this turtle. I just literally broke at that point. Like, deep down, I was very, very unhappy. And it was brewing in my head for a lot of the expedition, this feeling of, I could have done something, but I couldn't, the safety risk. And since then, I kind of was like, I've got to act. I can't watch this anymore. I mean, I've seen vanishing glaciers, I've seen really bad weather events, polluted waterways, which are in the UK. There's so much devastation going on, and it's just, I just don't want to be a spectator anymore. So I decided I'm going to take action. And in action, it was very much like this, you know. First thing I was doing was researching all the problems. Stupid idea. So as soon as you go into Google environmental issues, this all comes up, and oh my God, you know, you've got, you know, it's just very frustrating, overwhelming. It's very tough, and I started developing a bit of eco-anxiety because I knew I was part of the problem, but I didn't quite know what I could do to contribute to the solution. So I was struggling. I was a bit struggling with it. And one of the things I really do, whenever I'm struggling, I have this like thing that always gets me out of any hole, any difficulty. And you may have heard me say hope earlier. When I was walking in nature, I found hope. Hope for me is what gets me out of any difficulty. Whenever like I'm in an expedition and it's really, really tough, or I'm going through a difficult challenge, it's not mindfulness and things like that. Being present is really, really overwhelming at times. For me, the resilience comes in knowing that today's burdens will be lighter tomorrow. You know, it's going to get easier. And having that hope was what stirred me to start changing things for myself, change my ways. I had to lead myself. And this question, this quote is really, I remember saying it to myself. I was like, well, if I want to see ethical change, I've got to start with myself. And then that just rings true. It's like, if you want to be an ethical leader, you've got to start by leading yourself ethically. And it was really a big turning point for me, because suddenly I was thinking, okay, what's my environmental, what's my impact here? You know, this is a nice little graph I made, it's a simplified graph. But I had to research, like, okay, how do I live right now? You know, what am I taking from the ecosystems and whatever? And I wrote this huge list of all the things I was doing, because I needed to understand what to measure so I could improve myself in terms of being more ethical. And there was a lot of different actions that I could have taken, and some of them, I was pretty poor. You know, I was not very good at the time. I was gallivanting around the world, flying to different parts, doing expeditions and whatever, and I was, eating what I want, doing it. I was definitely not in my best state. So what I ended up having to do, I had to change things. I had to change things up. And ethical leadership is it's not like I don't call it like a title. It's not business leaders are ethical leaders. And I think like a parent can be an ethical leader. Anyone can be an ethical leader. It's about leading yourself with long-term thinking in mind, thinking long-term, thinking about the future, thinking of your impact. And, it's good fun when you start getting into it, because you start realizing, actually, I could improve that, and it becomes a bit of a game of how you can improve your impact on everything. But it doesn't need to be the big things either. You can do small things, small actions that add up and create a bit of a collective change. And I started with small stuff, litter picking and eating differently, and then suddenly I moved into bigger stuff that was hard-hitting, like saying no to sponsorship deals. That was hard. Like, that's big, as an expedition person, like going on a transatlantic road and saying, no, I don't want to take your sponsorship because I don't believe in your ethics. I mean, that was hard, because they can just fund you straight away. It's super quick and easy. I mean, doing it that way is very easy. You get money very quickly. But if you start like picking and choosing the people you want to work with, suddenly it becomes more of a challenge. And then the other thing I needed to do as well was like reduce my flights and stuff like that. And as someone who loves to explore and go to these places, it's really hard to let go of that sort of aspect. So I was taking some real, doing some real sacrifices, but I believed I could change, and I did. Who's heard of this word, sustainable? Has anyone heard of it? It's my new favorite word. Basically, it means that there's a lot of people who talk about sustainability like me right now, talking about sustainability. And they go on and on about it in their company reports, their marketing campaigns. They go on and on about it in all these different areas. And nothing actually happens, because ultimately, if you want something to change, implementation and action is required. So I'm pretty much done with sustainable. I don't want any more sustainable. I want to see action now. And from my personal perspective, that's what I did. I took action. And this is my first big form of action in what I was doing, from an expedition standpoint. I started to think carefully, okay, I want to do expeditions, but how can I do an expedition that is, better for the planet, maybe more restorative, regenerative in some way? How can I do this? It was a hard question. It was very difficult, and I had to tear apart a whole expedition. I was thinking, well, I need to create some sort of adventure that combines environmental responsibility and adventure together with exploration and put them together. But how can I do that? And so I came up with this concept, eco-adventure, and to be honest, it's not like a marketing. I'm not trying to make it like a marketing jargon or a new buzzword or whatever. But basically, adventure and doing things alongside the adventure that are restorative and good for the planet, that's kind of what I was getting at. And I'm trying to keep it super simple, because this is how I felt like expeditions need to go. We need to get to a stage where we're not gallivanting all over the world. I mean, lots of people have seen Everest. Have you seen how many pieces of litter are at the top of Everest? Have you seen how many people fly there every year? I mean, as explorers or people as part of this society, we have a bit of responsibility as well to kind of educate people on the, trails that we leave behind. It's more than just going to explore places now, I think. It's about going to explore places, trying not to leave too much behind, and trying to leave it maybe in a better state, if not the same state. But it's getting difficult because adventure and exploration has become very consumeristic, especially in this day and age with selling the lifestyle online. And this is quite challenging. So this is my kind of fight back. This is the fight back here. And I'm trying to push back on the way we do things. So things that you start to consider is where do I go? So I decided I'm going to stick into the UK, keep it local. How am I going to sleep? Well, I'll just camp, keep it simple, go camping. What am I going to eat? I'll try and eat as local as possible, contribute to the local food. And just started thinking of every single thing. Do I need that brand to support me? Do I need that new top? Is that going to really help me? Can I just use what I've already got? And just thinking like this and changing up the whole, we did loads of stuff. I could write a whole blog on all the different things we did to try and reduce the impact and make it, as low impact as possible. I mean, I could write loads on it. But fundamentally, we have the opportunity anytime, any place, anywhere to change the way we do things. And what I love about this group, SES, is that you're pioneers. Lots of people have this mindset of exploration and seeing new things, taking the leap, having the courage to do something different or go somewhere different. Why can't we do that in this light as well? It's just the same concept, isn't it? You're just innovating the way you do things. You're just trying it out in a different way. So what did we do? Here's the expedition in a couple slides. We did an A to B bikepacking journey, but there was a twist. We also cycled across water. We started in Orkney in the, you can't see it on this map because it's been cut off at the top, but above mainland Scotland is an island called Orkney. Some of you may know of it. We started there, and we cycled across Orkney, and we cycled then across the Pentland Firth to mainland Scotland on water bikes. And then we did a whole joggle route, which was cycling through the UK down to Cornwall. And then from Cornwall, we cycled on water bike again to the Isles of Scilly. So 2 big water bike crossings. And what was really about, it's challenging. That in itself, that's a lot of cycling, that's challenging. People were thinking loads of logistics here. That's going to be tough, water cycling and things like this. To add layers to it, what we wanted to do is we wanted to join all these different amazing eco-projects along the route. We wanted to visit energy transition sites. We wanted to visit best rewilding and regenerative agricultural sites. We wanted to visit all of these great innovators in their own domain and combine it in one route, which would then be a powerful message, if it was filmed, to world leaders of what's possible today if we take action instead of talking sustainababble. So that was the goal. See as many eco-projects as possible and do this cycle at the same time and do it as low impact as possible. That is a challenge. It was a challenge. So here it is. There's Bursay, northwest of Orkney, and there's the water bike crossing. And then this was the route we took through, some national parks, and we visited different eco-projects along the way. And then we did a water bike crossing to the Isles of Scilly there. So it was, it's a nice time. We did it during the pandemic, so that was pretty tough. Not many expeditions happened on the pandemic. Funders were dropping out because of uncertainty, and we had to be really, really flexible with how we did our expedition. There was a few false starts, about 4. Had to redo the timeline 4 times to get this over the line. Closing, opening, closing, and then eventually we got an open time to do it, 2 weeks. But yeah, as you can imagine, prepping for this was a major overhaul. And everyone who joined part of this expedition, everyone who was part of this, was a volunteer. There was no one paid here to do it. It was all voluntary. And we had about 10 volunteer team members. We had an expedition team of 5, and then a film crew as well. And we had to coordinate all these people and all of these stakeholders, all these eco projects. And then we had to create a timeline and a route and everything like that. So you can imagine the admin was just ridiculous, and the challenge was there. I'm not going to bore you on that one. I think you can all probably appreciate how much effort went into it. But I'd like to thank, every time this slide comes out, everyone who was involved, because it was definitely a massive team effort. Without a team, there's no way this would have happened. So, day 1, Orkney. That's our route a bit closer up there of where we were cycling. And one of the biggest risks was the Pentland Firth crossing. You had to have the right timing and the right conditions to do the crossing. That put a lot of pressure, because if you think about all the coordinated projects that we were visiting, we were going to do some tree planting, removing invasive species, talk about energy transition, all these different projects that we were going to do and meet. It was all tightly scheduled. So if there was a delay, we would literally, everything goes out of whack and the whole project falls apart like dominoes. So we really needed it to be bang on, the conditions. And we needed like things low tide, neap tide, a neap tide. You know a neap tide, the difference between a high and low tide is very small. We needed that because the Pentland Firth is seriously, seriously dangerous. Well, I'll go into it in a bit details, but first, when we cycled across Orkney, it's an amazing place. If you've never been, I'd recommend going. There's fantastic ecology up there, but there's also beautiful archaeology sites. We visited a 5,000-year-old Neolithic settlement called Skara Brae, which was really fascinating. And we went to the Ring of Broadgare, which is up there. You can see that picture. And there was fantastic sites to visit, some ecological sites. But what was really stark was it was just very barren and full of grass. And when I did some research, the whole island used to be covered in trees. And there's now a tiny forest that is like literally no much bigger than maybe this block in Chelsea. There's a little forest on the whole of Orkney. It's tiny, absolutely, and it's all plantation. It's not even the original trees. So there's been maybe a lot of agriculture going on this island. Anyway, let's talk about this bit, because this is more exciting. And this was the Pentland Firth. And Pentland Firth is actually not a firth. So a firth is an inlet in coastal water. This is actually a strait. The Pentland Firth is actually a strait. It's not a firth. That's first fact. And the Pentland Firth, the tidal currents here are some of the largest in Europe. So imagine a tide current of 16 kilometers per hour, 10 miles per hour. It's pretty powerful. It's very dangerous. And there's also loads of whirlpools to contend with too, like the Merry Men of May, and also the Selsky whirlpools that have taken lots of different ships. They've crushed ships in the past. So you've got all of that to contend with. And you think, oh, this little floating water bike, how's that going to get across the Pentland Firth, this thing that destroys passenger vessels all the time? So we had to be really careful with the conditions and the timing. And we had a boat pilot that just knew this place like the back of his hand. And his name was Hamish. And he was telling us when we were going to go, how we're going to go, what's the best time to go, that sort of thing. And we were very lucky. We wild camped just at the south of, I don't know if this has got a laser pointer. Does it have a laser pointer? Yeah, it might do. Yeah. At the south part here of Orkney and Ronaldsay Island, we wild camped here. And we waited till 4 a.m. We had to do a 4 a.m. and then we could go across and do the cycle. That's what it looks like most of the time. I've been across 5 times, and it's always looked like this, except the one time we went on water bike, which was flat like a pancake. And it was fantastic. But we waited for the neap tide. We waited and waited for the right time to do it, and that's why it was a success. And I don't actually think it's very replicable, but if you really try and wait for the right conditions, you can make it. But we had a lot of luck that year. But the reason why we wanted to do Orkney and the Pentland Firth was because you think about the Pentland Firth and tidal power, yeah? It's got a lot of tidal power here. It's known as the Saudi Arabia of tidal energy. They have an incredible project, Maygen, a project at the it's like a turbine that sits at the bottom of the seabed, and it's literally consistently now generating tens of gigawatts of electricity in the tidal range. And so basically, we started talking to the different people, stakeholders, Orbital Marine Power and the European Marine Energy Centre, to learn about the tidal energy and how it could be one of the many solutions to energy. Because it's very consistent. It's not intermittent like solar or wind. It's consistent. Usually, tides have very consistency. You can always rely on them from an energy perspective. So it's very good to talk to them about these different projects. Obviously, the ecology was pretty exceptional as well. And when I say the luck that we had to dependent crossing, we had a lot of luck as well, because we saw orcas the night before. Then it was swimming around South Ronaldsay Island. Now, obviously, they were one of our risks. You know, an orca might see this water bike as a little toy to play with, might want to like nibble, pull it around, or whatever. You know, there is always a risk of orcas. But thankfully, they didn't come to do any of that. I would have loved to have been alongside an orca, but it never happened. But we saw them, though. That was pretty rare. A lot of people go up there and never see them. So in the UK, actually, there used to be a huge pod of orcas, loads and loads of pods of orcas. There's now only 8 resident orcas in the UK, and they're mostly in the northwestern of Scotland. So there's not many of them left now, but you can still see them. So that's a water bike, yeah? So let's talk about the mechanics of the water bike now. So think of a water bike as you've got 2 elongated like fender floats, and then you have a spinning bike which has a drivetrain and it's connected to a submerged propeller, and that's basically how you move. It sounds very simple, but actually this bike is very slow. It's like cycling uphill all the time. At 3 times harder, I would say, the amount of pressure you have to put down, because you're pushing water, right? And if you're weight like me, heavy, you're going to have to push harder. And yeah, so the water bike was pretty interesting, but the most important thing was learning how to fix this thing if something went wrong. So we had to learn, we took it apart, we learned how to fix it. We had a spare one as well in case. But I'd just like to show you kind of the crossing now, so you can have a sort of feel of what it looks like. I remember having a bet with the boat pilot. He didn't believe this would be possible. He thought you're joking. Like, people don't even swim this, let alone go on a water bike. I said, I will bet you £100. If you go on the right day with us, we'll make it happen. I let him keep the 100 quid, but it was very much like very possible. Did you see we had 2 water bikes? We kept two on the go because we were able to have 2. We also had a boat pilot, which was Hamish. That was really important. We thanked him at the end. He was super essential for us getting across. Soon after we left and got on our bikes again, we went to this famous sign, the Geographical sign, the John O'Groats sign, yeah. And this was to mark the start of a John O'Groats to Land's End cycle, which is short for joggle. And it's in the northeastern tip of mainland Scotland. And it was really nice to say goodbye to the boat pilots and just carry on the adventure, from one adventure to another. But when we left, we realized that the conditions had been rapidly changing, and the boat pilot started filming some of the sea, and it just churned up again. We were super lucky to have made it across. We went to Dunnet's Head. So people think sometimes that John O'Groats is the most northern point of mainland Scotland. This is not true. It's called Dunnet's Head. That's the most northern point. And when we were there, we saw puffins. Some of you may know already that the UK is one of the least biodiverse places in the world. We rank in the bottom 10% of biodiversity, according to Biodiversity Intactness Index. That's pretty bad. 1 in 6 species are at the risk of extinction, and 97% of our wildflower meadows since 1930s has disappeared. I mean, we've literally devastated wildlife and biodiversity in this country. But our mission was all about instilling hope, and there is wildlife to protect. There is things to keep safe. It's not over. We can regenerate. We can do reintroductions. We can improve the state of biodiversity in the UK. It's something we can do right now. And that's what our mission was. It was very centered around how can we restore the very environments that we explore and live in. I know lots of us travel to far-flung regions of the planet, and we're exploring all these great places and seeing all these incredible creatures. I mean, I remember myself seeing the swimming with the whales and things like that. But the problem I find with it is that we're trying to protect these places very far away, but we're not doing much in our own country and where we are. And there's a lot more we could do. It's just around the corner, and it doesn't require too much effort or too much investment. It's stark. Anyway, we cycled through the Scottish Highlands and made it to the Kenyon National Park. Now, a lot of people say to me, okay, what's wild in the UK? And a lot of people who do travel, they know what wild is. But then when you're in the UK, it's very hard to find something wild. But I would say Kenyon gets pretty close to wild. It's the largest national park, 4,600 square kilometers. It's got an amazing Caledonian pine forest that dates back to the last ice age. It also has the Kenyon Plateau, which is very remote and has sub-Arctic ecosystems there. There is Scottish wildcat and ospreys. It's a very, very exceptional place in the UK for biodiversity and wildness. So when we wanted to go explore it and visit it, and we met up with a park ranger because, interestingly, since the pandemic, there's this influx of tourism and staycations and things like this. And a park like Kenyon's, when the pandemic happened, was not really ready for this huge influx of people rushing to it. It was a huge growing pressure of tourism up there. So we wanted to talk to the park ranger. He was very much under the impression that they were doing a good job managing it all, and he was explaining his sort of solution in that they have this huge funding pot now in Scotland, which is for rangers to educate new people on the nature and how they can protect it. Because a lot of people go up there to experience things. I mean, we all go on expeditions and things to experience things, but we're not always maybe thinking about how we protect these things that we explore. So they're very much, they're all a climate solution themselves, doing the education piece, and they also go into schools and other places too. But unfortunately, they're underfunded, and it looks like a lot of these ranger programs are going to disappear. And it's really dangerous because when you have very little education in places where the biodiversity is already at the brink of extinction in some places, and then you've got loads of people going there who have no idea what to do to protect or treat this place in a good way, you're thinking, oh my God, is this the tipping point of the end of this? So I very much am an advocate of national parks, and I really like what they do. So we spent a lot of time trying to showcase their sort of innovation. They get some funding as well to do infrastructure projects. And what their goal is to put all of the infrastructure in one little place, an area of the national park, as to keep the wild area untouched. And I think that's really smart. I think that was a good way to do it. After that, we cycled through some dirt tracks and single tracks, and it was really good to get a bit lost and stuck in the mud and in peatland bogs and things like this. And we went to Loch Lomond and the Trossachs, and it was just a real lovely adventure. This is a little video. Yeah, we got lost.
Negotiating the bikes over a river. So it could get interesting.
Love it when a path disappears.
Walking into the railing because it's basically a swamp. We are.
And the reason why we wanted to put that in the film was to show that, you don't have to go to far-flung places to see great scenery and try and, you can do things local and have fun. It's refreshing to be in a place like the UK and be like, oh, got to get the OS map out, the satellite phone, your phone is not working for GPS. It was refreshing to do that. And it's a bit of exploration for some people, which was really fun. And then when we got to Loch Lomond and Trossachs, occasionally we would emerge from the depths of wild Scotland and then move to some roads. And we came to the Woodland Trust and we went to their largest managed site in the UK, a big woodland restoration project that's been going on for 200 years now. And it's a fantastic project. I urge anyone to go visit it because what they've done is incredible. There was all this agriculture and destroyed land and they've completely regenerated the site. There's now, it's home to eagles and places, biodiversity that's very rare and some red deer and things. And it was really good to get involved in sort of what they were doing. But still, even in a remote place like that, we still had to do litter picking, which was really annoying. So wherever we went, we were doing litter picking and trying to regenerate as we went, but also get involved in advocacy, or if they asked us to you've got a load of people here, do you want some invasive species removed? We'd do it. That was what we were all about, like trying to leave things better than when we were there. So yeah, it was a good time. We met up with our kit sponsor, Endura, as part of the film and the adventure. When you do like a team sport, you need all these logos and yeah. So we had a kit sponsor who did a recycled jersey and recycled shorts, which was quite cool, called Endura. We went to their site in Scotland and it was fantastic. They were doing rewilding, regenerative action on their own land. They were investing more in planet-positive things than they were taking out in terms of their carbon emissions. I mean, carbon emissions is a whole new topic, but they were doing a lot for regenerating what they were making profits from. So they knew that the ecosystems help make their business profitable because, they take from the planet, they create the clothing, they get everyone cycling on the clothing, and then they make money. And they realize it all comes from the planet. So they've just done the whole circle, and I love that. And then we went to England and left the rugged landscape of Scotland behind and into the rolling hills, charming villages, and eventually went into the Lake District. We had a lovely cycle route between, I don't know if anyone's done it, but there's a great cycleway between Glasgow and Carlisle. It's repurposed A-roads and railway, and it's a fantastic, open, massive, wide road for cycling. It's fantastic. I recommend doing it. It's really good. We got to Lake District, and that was a real shock because we met up with a National Trust educator who almost made everyone cry. It was a pretty tough meeting up interview. He basically was at a forest school, and we wanted to talk to him about a real climate solution, which is educating younger people about what's happening. And his view was, if we can take people from a young age, connect them with nature and the outdoors, get them hands-on, doing things with their hands, getting in touch with the ecosystems, they're more likely to understand it and want to protect it when they're older. Because in his eyes, he was thinking, the other generations is over. They're not thinking the same way. We need to start with the younger people. And that was pretty much like, wow, hard hitting. And then you could hear kids saying, we want to protect the planet and stuff like this. And it was quite emotional at times, but we got through. And then we had a really good meet up with another great location, Kirkstone Pass. Has anyone cycled Kirkstone Pass? It's a famous route in the Lake District. It's one of the highest elevated roads that you could cycle. It's one of the famous routes, 450 meters, so good on the legs. I loved it. It was good fun. My bike hated it, and the crank actually, annoyingly, the crank broke on me, on my bike, on so much tension at one stage, and I had to fix it at the top, which was annoying. Anyway, got past it. So then we cycled down through some, I would say, more uninspiring landscape. There was a lot of cities and a lack of green space. And we chose to go in cities because we wanted to explore the interconnected sort of green highways through cities to see, how much connection and migratory corridors do we have for biodiversity. And it's actually a stark contrast. Glasgow was very fantastic, actually, for their green corridors. And as you came into England, it wasn't so good. and it was quite hard to pick out the green corridors, which was pretty upsetting. But we managed to just kind of put our heads down and was like, let's get through it. And we got to Shropshire Hills, and it opened up and lovely scenery again. And then we dropped into Brecon Beacons National Park, and then we went across to the Wye Valley here. So you can see Brecon Beacons, and then we went down the Wye Valley, across the Severn Bridge, over Bristol Channel, down to Bristol, and then across the Clifton Suspension Bridge, which I think many people might know, and then into Cheddar Gorge, which was a fantastic route. But along the way, we had people who came and cycled with us, who really loved our mission and what we were about. And we had this guy called Mike Axon. He also donated some money as well towards our project. He was incredible. He had this, can you see this little purple bike? It's called a Velomobile. And I thought water bikes were a bit fancy, but he had this this Velomobile thing. And that was going 70 kilometers per hour down hills. But up hills, it was pretty slow. But it was just it was like a bullet going past us and then coming down. It was really fun having him on the cycle. He livened it up a bit. And we had a great conversation because he's from a company called Vectos. And they're all about sustainable town planning. So they do the planning before a town is built. And they focus on active travel networks to key destinations. And the active travel networks that they try to build are going to have nature and green corridors as well. So you have this incredible new city that is well interconnected for the health and well-being of us, but also the health and well-being of the planet. And he didn't say this was his project, but one project he said that actually had sustainable town planning in mind. Milton Keynes? Anyone been to Milton Keynes? According to him, that's one of the best current planned towns that we've got in the UK. So that was quite interesting. And then we met up with Hayley from Sustrans. Has anyone heard of Sustrans? It's an organisation that's expanding their national cycle network. They're all about getting more cycle lanes and paths around the UK. We were advocating with them this e-bike scheme, which was to try and promote people to get from the city into national parks and using an e-bike, because not everyone has a car, and some people want to exercise and they want to use an e-bike. So we're trying to get them into the outdoors, and hopefully that helps them sort of connect with nature, which is one part of the solution. Once you connect with nature, you start to learn to love it, and then you want to protect it. And then we jumped into Exmoor National Park, which is part of a big, massive tectonic uplift 300 million years ago, Devonian sandstone time. So it's very, very steep. It's got one of the highest sea cliffs in the UK. I think it is the highest, actually, called the Great Hangman at 318 meters tall. And that's taller than the Shard. And yeah, it was one of the toughest days on the legs because it was serious elevation. And we had to cover a lot more elevation on the Exmoor day. And then we actually moved across from Exmoor into Dartmoor. But before I do that, we had a great tree planting activity day in Exmoor, which was great, with the National Park Ranger, Graham. And he was really cool to meet. When we were in Exmoor, you can see it's like a foggy, if you've watched Harry Potter, it's a bit like Forbidden Forest or something like this when we were entering, because it's a temperate rainforest with lots of rare fungi and moss oak trees. It's a really cool place to go. We've got Atlantic rainforest in the UK, so temperate rainforest, that is. And when we met up with Graham, he was telling us they had this 20-year-old project for a very long time. It had plastic spiral guards, but they decided they're going to innovate, do things differently, try it out, and they got a biodegradable plastic tube. But they did their research, because some of these biodegradable plastic tubes that help the trees grow and keep them in line, some of them they decompose too quickly, or they might decompose too slowly. So that's not very good if you're trying to grow a tree. And then the other issue sometimes is that they may have a little bit of synthetic residue from plastic. So you have to find the right one. But ultimately, it was a great, seeing conservation, long-term conservation innovation, like innovating conservation. So it was very good. When we went to Dartmoor, we met up with another park ranger who was helping us understand the impact of peatland bogs, which are, I didn't know before I went on this. When I went to Dartmoor, I had no clue about this. 70% of the UK's drinking water comes from the catchment areas of peatland bogs. 70%. That's huge. It's also one of those big carbon stores. You can see a stat there. Stores carbon 5 times more than trees. But the great thing about peatland bogs is that they also prevent, flooding and things like this. A A fact that not everybody knows is that Exmoor and Dartmoor were once densely forested. They were big forests around sort of the Ice Age. And then after the Ice Age, 12,000 years ago, climate started to warm, trees started giving way to bogs and different heathlands. But also there was a lot of agricultural clearance from Neolithic times to today. We've had a lot of agricultural clearance, and that's kind of cut down the forest. So the moors themselves were never actually like moors, really, in the past 12,000 years ago. They were forests that we can regenerate and we can restore. Wistman's Wood here, very famous woodland that people come from abroad to see in Dartmoor. That's an ancient woodland, but it's not really that ancient. It actually isn't that old. It's proof that we can restore in Dartmoor. Yeah, my partner, she's on a trustee board, which is all about regenerating the Dartmoor landscape into, it's called Moor Trees. Check them out, they're cool. And yeah, so we spoke to him about all of these, the great innovation of peatland, but the problem is, you know, we've got all this agricultural clearance, getting rid of peatland. We've got people trying to sell peat. We've got drying out of peat and drainage of peat. All these problems are preventing the peat. But as I said earlier, the climate change problem is really a human problem. So you start getting rid of the peatland, suddenly 70% of the UK's water, yeah, starts affecting us. Then we moved to a new diet. We moved to Cornwall. We started eating Cornish pasties. It was really good. Had about 4 a day because you cycle and burn a lot of calories. We went to the southernmost point, Lizard Point, which was a really great place to see the rare Cornish heathlands. There's 40 plus different plant species in this area of Cornwall. So if you ever wanted to go to a really unique ecosystem down here on that point, it was very, very cool to go. It was very tough, the cycling here, because there's a lot of granite rock. And within the granite rock, there was, of course, different other deposits, sandstone and limestones. But they erode much easier and faster than the granite rock. So actually, the topography is very much like this, you know? And it was very hard, up and down, because we're just going over all the hard rock. But we almost got a site visit. I was gutted. It got cancelled last minute, but we almost got a site visit to a geothermal site, and I was really excited to get everyone there. So people had never been here before. But this is called the United Downs Geothermal site in Cornwall. And it's essentially the granite in the ground has a lot of radioactive thorium and uranium, which is still generating heat. So there is the opportunity to drill a borehole into the granite, send some cold water down, drill another borehole, and then extract the heated water back up the borehole, and then you can have electricity and heat 24/7, no intermittency. So it's pretty cool. But we didn't actually get to go, but hey-ho, would have been good. And then eventually we made it to Land's End, and that was pretty good. I enjoyed finishing there. It was really, really fun. There was a lot of other people finishing their cycle. You know, all these teams started congregating and arriving, going, "Hey, we finished the joggle to Land's End thing, John O'Groats to Land's End." And there was one team, you know, "Do you want to come to the pub, you know, celebrate?" And we showed them the water bike, and we said, "Look, this is our water bike, and tomorrow we're going to cycle across that sea." And they were just like, "What?" And it was really good. But very, very quickly after that, the boat pilot rang us after that sunk in, and he said, 8 a.m., see you at Senham Cove, which is I haven't got a map. Have I got a map? Oh, yeah, I've got a map. Here, Senham Cove here. 8 a.m., see you there, and you will do your water bike crossing. So that was great. Before we did that, we swam in the Marine Conservation Zone, which had some great seagrass meadows. Near seagrass meadows, they can store carbon 35 times faster than rainforests, so it's a pretty cool climate solution. But what's also great about that habitat is you've got Atlantic grey seals, basking sharks, you've got dolphins, and maybe you saw in the news, humpback whales. They love this environment too, so yeah, we should get some more seagrass. So the next water bike crossing, number 2, way harder than the first one. 53 kilometers in distance as opposed to 12. So there was a lot more to cycle. So there was a lot more time for the tides to change, for weather to come in. So the risk was larger. You also had cargo ships, a big, busy shipping lane to deal with. And then you had winds that can sometimes be about 40 to 50 miles per hour. And the waves can sometimes be 10 meters high here. So you think about it, that water bike, you know, it's not meant to be here. But we had, again, planned the conditions right. We went on a neap tide. We went when the wind was at its lowest, and we had very good conditions and a boat pilot who came with us. And he basically said, you need a lot of luck, and I hope you're really fit, because you need to make it in time, because if you don't make it within 7 or I think it was 7 hours or something like this, the tide is going to start pulling you the other way, and I don't believe you're going to have enough power to get to the end. So there was a race against time, so we had to put a lot of power down. So that's what it looks like usually. I've been to the Isles of Scilly on ferry 3 times now, and yeah, it's very similar to this. This is the Selonian 3-passenger vessel, so yeah, we didn't have those conditions. We had better ones like this. But it was such an eventful trip. It was such an eventful trip. I mean, we were there, and we had to dodge some cargo ships. We had a sailing vessel wave at us. We had even kayakers who tried to do the same, use the best conditions to get across on their kayaks, which was fun. And then we also had someone in a plane that saw us from the plane, and they posted in the Facebook group of the Isle City, like, what the hell? And it was really fun. And we actually had a sea choir that sung us off before we went. Sea shanties. I'm not going to do sea shanties. I'm not very good at them, but maybe someone else can do it later after a few more beers. But yeah, we had sea shanties to wish us luck on the weather, and we had good weather. Let's watch it. Yeah.
So we stay on course, and doing a 1-hour shift. 1 hour on the boat, and an hour and a half resting. Got some dolphins! Woo-hoo! Oh yeah, yes!
Just about to.
Woo-hoo!
Here we are, pedaling to the Isles of Scilly, and we're over halfway.
Sea is absolutely slick right now. Home stretch now. Isaac and I are going to bring it in. Here's Isaac just there. Start hearing the people on the beach now. To the home stretch. Oh, careful with seaweed now. Uh-oh. This is tricky. Uh-oh. Full of seaweed here, so we can't actually go through.
Solid team. Big French one. Yeah. That was good fun. Yeah, it was a good crack. That was like 7 hours, I think, the cycle. And we did start feeling that the last bit, the tide was pulling us back. We did make it, and you saw the seaweed caught us up. We had to swim it in. That was great. Really enjoyed that. But yeah, thanking the boat pilots, and we made it to the end, popped a bottle of fizz, and had a good time. But quickly, we went round the harbour. Look who we saw. Wally the walrus. Very cute, but also sad story, no? He's meant to be from the Arctic. It's not meant to be here. You got Spain, France, and I think Ireland that he had visited, as well as Cornwall. It's just it's just sea ice is melting. They're having to go further afield for rest and recovery and food, and it's pretty sad actually that Wally had to, got lost and off track and is down here. So there you go. But great innovation that we saw on the whole trip. One message: they didn't have a fear of failure. Any of these people. All these people doing the innovations, the eco projects, they weren't worried about failure because they said the biggest risk was not doing anything. So they decided to take that mindset and just give it a go. And it's very much like the expedition mindset, The risk of everything can be so big, but if you don't take the leap, you never do it. It never happens. And these guys were trying, and it was fantastic. And they were also very, very interesting because they were like the most innovative leaders I've ever come across. Other industries I've worked in, I've always seen people protecting secrets. These guys were not protecting secrets. They would talk and build bridges across sectors and industries. They were talking to, a clothing company would talk to a food manufacturing company to learn best practices. They were very, open to collaboration, which I don't often see, which made them really good and fast developments. That was pretty good. And also, they were excellent communicators. They could literally synthesize a very complex solution or problem and make it so that everyone could understand it. That's the secret. If you can't get everyone to understand it, then it's never going to happen. And these were experts at it. And we tried to do it with our film and have the same message. We also had such a good co-creation sort of thing going on where every stakeholder, every single person, I think we had about 80 different organizations involved in our thing, including the United Nations. And like literally, had United Nations down to some guy on his farm, you know. It was, it was just like huge stakeholder mix. But we were very, very careful. We wanted to co-create everything, like bring them all involved in early and often. You know, tell us what you think about this, what you think about that. How can we make this better? And that's what made the project really good. And we had a really good culture. And like this was the full team. You know, there's a lot of us, and I could name all the names here. But you know, as one big team, they were all very much on the mission with us about let's make this eco-adventure a blueprint to show that others can do this with their own adventures too. That was the goal. We literally just wanted to have a blueprint. And we made a film to show like what's possible, and it won awards. It's gone all over the world. It also got shown at the United Nations COP conference to world leaders of what is possible if you take action, not sustain the babble. And yeah, it was really, really powerful film. It's on Amazon Prime called 14 Days South Over Sea and Land, so you can watch it anytime, or you can send me a message and I can send you a link. And we raised some money for the national parks for implementing climate solutions. So they needed the money, of course. I told you they're underfunded, so yeah. And then I leave you with this message. No, I won't actually. There'll be another thing. But before we go on, anything you do in innovation, it's really important to measure success. Did you see all those stats on the last slide? All those slides. I was measuring with the team everything we did so that we could show that the effectiveness of our efforts. Because otherwise, if you don't measure and show the success and show what's possible and prove it, no one will do it. And that's what we tried to do. Here's a blueprint. This is how we did. This is how the impact is. Go and have a go.